Thank you. Greatly appreciate the intro. With that, we'll go ahead and open the meeting. If I could have a roll call, please.
Danaskis.
Here.
Reynolds.
Here.
Steimel.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Gross.
Here.
Ryan. Ryan. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, item number 3 is our minutes. We have one set of minutes before us this evening from our last meeting from April 15th, a regular set of meeting minutes. Is there any discussion, or I'll entertain a motion on the minutes? Raise your
Mr.
hand.
Chair.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Walker?
Yes, Mr. Chair, move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Motion, support?
Support.
Motion support by Mr. Gross. I think was first. Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. We have to do a roll call on this one too.
I've seen other meetings being conducted where you can do,
Voice
Yes.
on this one. Okay.
Yep.
All right. All in favor, aye, and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay, and a thumbs down. All right. I say the minutes are approved. We'll do one more item. Then we do have a public hearing scheduled for 7:05, but we'll get through our agenda review and approval. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Or if not, I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Chairman, I move we approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Gross, supported by Mr. Steimel. Is there any public or any further discussion from my fellow commissioners on the agenda as presented? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor and second. Is there any public discussion via video on the agenda? Raise your hand. Seeing none, anyone on the phone, state your name. Any chat bubbles or emails, Ms. Gerling?
no, there's not.
Thank you. Go ahead and ask for all in favor then of the agenda as the motion is presented. Aye and raise your hand, or yes and raise your hand.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
All opposed, nay, and a thumbs down. All right. Agenda is approved. With that, it is 7:05, so we're going to go ahead and recess the regular meeting of the Orion Township Planning Commission. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing for PC 2019-05. This is the Township initiated text amendment to zoning ordinance number 78, Articles 2, 33, and 34. That we'll go ahead and recess the regular meeting, and we'll open the public hearing for that matter here. Just reading the screen, sorry. With that, Ms. Gerling, can you give us an overview on the public hearing? Or who's the presenter on this one?
That is.
Yes, that would be me. Good evening.
Oh, wonderful. All right, Ron will kick it off. Thank you.
Okay, so we actually have before us tonight 2 different proposed amendment areas that are under consideration. One being to the Gingeville Village Center Overlay District. Here we're looking to make a number of rather modest changes, but those that have been discussed at the Planning Commission in terms of being needed in order to provide some clarification, provided some direction. So if we look at the first page of the amendments, it's actually labeled page 33-1 in terms of the ordering. Item number F, the schedule of regulations. Just a note indicating that when a proposed use otherwise permitted in the overlay district is not a permitted use in the underlying district, the Planning Commission shall use the standards of the district that most closely corresponds to the permitted uses and can be modified by the Planning Commission. This is just really more of a clarification to make that clear in terms of those types of situations when they arise. Moving on, most of the other changes are in one section later under residential appearance, building height, and density. This is where we're trying to provide some clarification in terms of specific standards that apply to residential development within this particular overlay district. And in this case, residential density is being set so that it doesn't exceed 9 dwelling units per acre for the portion of the development that is designated for residential use, but the maximum density can be increased to 20 dwelling units per acre, and the maximum height and the number of stories can be increased to 3 stories and 45 feet if all of the following conditions are met. And there's some conditions outlined here that deals with issues such as a minimum amount of open space set at 20%, information regarding the front-facing garages, the multiple family units proposed. There's different types of units that are outlined here. And one of the things we've tried to do is incorporate not only apartments and townhouses, but other missing middle type housing types that could be a good fit in this district, including bungalow court, small multiplex, and duplex variety units. And then also indicating that no building exceeding 35 feet in height shall be located closer than 100 feet from an adjacent single-family residential district. This is just to provide some separation from existing single-family. And then the final component related to this is the fact that we've also added definitions for those missing middle housing types that we talked about, the bungalow court, the small multiplex, and the townhouse residential, so that it's clear in terms of what exactly is envisioned. So we believe that these amendments will provide for some clarity and also provide for some more flexibility for this particular district. And would you like me to go on to the next set, or would you like to stop at this point, Mr. Chair?
I think we can go ahead and go through the next set, and we'll ask folks just take their notes, reserve them as a public hearing. So we can go through all the sections and we'll get the comments.
Okay, the next section deals with amendments to the Brown Road Innovation Zone. So we're doing a number of things to provide for clarification, starting off in the beginning under uses permitted, dealing with conflicts with underlying districts and the like, and noting that this district would supersede the underlying district. Then for the list of uses, we've tried to provide some clarification and make a few modest adjustments. For example, under type A uses, ancillary or support uses that are allowed, banks and credit unions with or without a drive-through, the clarification there is that both with and without drive-through are permitted. And then those requiring special approval would include other drive-through uses that excluding banks and credit unions. So if you have drive-through associated with a restaurant, for example, that's going to have a special land use approval required, whereas if it's with a bank, it would not require special land use approval. And then also in the type A use grouping, auto service and body repairs being eliminated from that particular area. And then as we move on to the type D uses, we wanted to make a clarification regarding indoor mini storage facilities, because right now they are permitted if they have centralized access, but it doesn't really speak to whether or not what happens when you don't have centralized access. So that's been added as requiring special land use approval. So it still could potentially be permitted in the district. So that's a good clarification as well. Moving on, there are some additional changes that also address multiple family residential. The focus of a number of amendments that the Township Planning Commission has been reviewing addresses multiple family. And in this case, it's spelling out that generally the requirements of the RM1 and RM2 district are required, except where they're modified by the requirements in this particular district. So in terms of bulk building and height, the maximum number of floors used as multiple family in this district would be 5. For freestanding multiple family buildings, The maximum building height would be 60 feet and 5 stories maximum, subject to the compatibility and setback standards. And then the maximum dimension of any building measured in a straight line would be 200 feet. There is a max, in terms of the dwelling units per acre, because of the unusual nature of this particular district and the fact that sometimes we could potentially see multiple family mixed in with office and residential in a single building. The density is really controlled by the bulk building and height, and the other setback landscaping and other stormwater management and off-street parking requirements. When more than one freestanding multiple building is proposed as part of a unified development, the number of stories should be varied. This is consistent with other requirements within the district and the vision of the district. Garages and carports are supposed to be oriented internally. Sites have to incorporate green spaces such as squares and linear open space and include benches, walking paths, shade trees, and other amenities that create places where residents would want to enjoy the outdoors. And then the overall site design of residential areas should have a focus on walkability and the maximum site coverage. There's a sliding scale here. The base is 40%. The Planning Commission can permit a site area that a maximum coverage area that exceeds 40%, subject to certain provisions, and including having at least 1/3 of parking spaces in garage, carport, or tuck under garages. And then a maximum lot coverage, 50% can be approved, subject to 50% of covered parking spaces provided. In no case shall the maximum site coverage exceed 60%. So trying to provide some flexibility here in this district. I know the township views this as an area where they're looking for lots of innovation, lots of creativity, and really trying to be a kind of a spark plug in this area. And these amendments will certainly help in that regard. And then parking requirements are for residential, calling out that in this district, there would be 1.5 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, plus there would be visitor spaces that are also required in this district. And then there's another provision that's added further on what I'm showing is page 152, but it's under a subsection 7D, where multiple family buildings may have covered projecting or recessed porches, covered stoops, or light wells if it's a brownstone type construction. So just specifying different types of building entrances that are compatible with residential dwelling units. So that's another good change in order to reflect that. And then also there's just recognizing the separation from outdoor storage areas. You currently have a separation of 500 feet if you're next to a residentially used parcel. So this would apply if there's residential use within this district. You'd have that same separation that would apply in that particular instance. So trying to provide some consistency and trying to bring the ordinance in line with some of the multiple family goals and some of the discussions that the Planning Commission has had. So that's my brief summary, and I'll be happy to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Really appreciate the great work on the proposed amendments and the overview you provided. Thank you. With that, this is the public hearing portion, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public for their comments, questions. With that, we'll start with anyone on video. And those in the video, please raise your name. Yes, Ms. Gerling.
I had anyone that's on a call, I had to mute you because you were getting feedback. So I'm going to unmute the callers in case they have any comment. But I do ask if you don't have a comment that you remute yourself so we're not getting the feedback.
Thank you for that monitoring. Appreciate that. Anyone on video, raise your hand if you're interested in making a comment in the public hearing. Anyone on the phone, please state your name. Any comments on the public hearing or questions? And if we had any other communications come in, Ms. Gerling, via the chat box or email or any letters on this particular matter, I didn't see any in the packet.
Nothing.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Okay. With that, I'll ask my fellow commissioners. This will be right in front of us after one matter under our new business. So I imagine most comments may be reserved for that, but any initial comments, questions from my fellow commissioners? Raise your hand. Oh, good. I saw them feverishly writing, so they probably have them all for later. All right. If unless Ms. Gerling or Rod or anyone else have something to add, yes, Ms. Gerling.
Just before we proceed back to the normal agenda, I would like to isolate the callers so I know. So I know that caller 1 is Mr. Thompson. Caller 2, if there's any other commissioners that phoned in, if they could speak so I can tell what caller number you are. Did anybody else phone in?
I did, Tammy.
Okay, so Judy, you're caller 2, and you're the one
Okay.
giving me the feedback. So when everyone's talking, unless you're ready to speak, you have to mute your phone, or I can mute it for you. But then when you want to talk, you need to let me know.
I have my phone muted.
We were getting feedback, so I'm not quite sure. But I'll keep you muted. Just raise your hand if you want to speak, and I'll unmute you.
Well, you know what? I was having trouble with my internet, and it seems to be okay now. So I'm going to get off the phone, and if I need to, I'll call back in.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. Keep it orderly and make sure we know where's everyone. Thank you. All right, unless Rod or anyone else has anything to add, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing for this matter on PC 2019-51, the Township initiated text amendment to zoning ordinance number 78, Articles 2, 33, and 34. We'll go ahead and reconvene our regular meeting of the Orion Township Planning Commission. And we had just approved our agenda when we had left off last. And so now we have item number 5, which is our public comment on any non-agenda items. So if there's any member of the public that would like to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda, now is the time, and we'll start out with those on video. Raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda. Seeing no takers, if there's anyone on the phone, we'll ask you to, I guess we don't have any other callers, but if there's anyone has any comments on the phone that may have joined us, and anything via chat box and or email that may have come in, Ms. Gerling?
No, sir.
All right, no public comments today on non-agenda items. Carrying on then, we'll go to item number 6, which is our consent agenda with no items before us this evening. Takes right into the main event of item number 7, new business. And our first item under new business, item A, is PC 2019-06, which is Silver Bell Point PUD final plan. The site's located on 4 vacant parcels south of Silver Bell Road on the east side of Joslyn Road. Parcel numbers are 0933-201, 001, parcel 0933-128, 001, parcel 0928-379-001, and parcel 0928-451-001. If the petitioner is ready, thank you, Ms. Gerling, for turning it over. I see the screen. If you're ready, please give us an overview here of this final planned unit development in front of us.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Thompson with CEA, representing Franklin Bridge Homes LLC this evening. Silverwell Point is located east of Joslyn Road and south of Silver Bell Road. The development is defined on its east side by the CN Railroad. We are proposing to develop, the site itself is approximately 74 acres, and we're proposing to develop a 28-acre single-family community with 46 single-family homes, a community park, and the site is all elevated above Mud Lake and the surrounding wetlands. Additionally, not shown on the plan you see before you, because this is our previous submittal, the 4 acres in the northeast corner at Silver Bell and Joslyn, we're proposing to donate a 4-acre parcel as a township park. Additionally, we'll be providing 20% passive recreational open space. Brief history. When we originally submitted the site plan, we had 60 lots. Through several meetings and assistance with both the planning department and the planning commissioners, we refined that plan down to 50 lots, which is the plan you see before you. In June of 2019, the Planning Commission forwarded the plans to the Township Board. And on June 17th, 2019, the board approved the preliminary PUD subject to removal of 4 additional lots, and those would be those 4 lots on Silver Bell. So the general site plan now looks like this. So we're here tonight to request a recommendation for final PUD approval, subject to the consultant's review letters, with the following amendments and clarifications. So number 1, the township safety path. We've provided a 8-foot wide path across our Joslin Road frontage as required by the ordinance. We are requesting not to extend that path outside of the development limit. Number 2, based on some clarifications of the woodland ordinance, we understand that the protected trees are exempt from replacement within the development. Therefore, there are 16 landmark trees that are to be removed within the development for a total of 481 caliper inches, with a 4-inch replacement. That's 120 replacement trees required. We currently are showing 115 replacement trees. So we're suggesting that we add 5 additional trees to the plan so that the replacement trees equal removed trees, and this will eliminate the need for the tree fund. Number 3, Jam Road. Jam Road is under the jurisdiction of the Road Commission. That road is their responsibility to maintain. We're offering to provide a one-time repair, but we believe long-term maintenance of that that EVA should remain under the jurisdiction of the Road Commission, and simply be requested by the township if repairs are needed, like we would do for any other gravel road that was in disrepair as owned by the county. Number 4, the ordinance requires that at least 50% of the dwelling units with attached garages include either side entry garages or recessed garages, meaning that the front of each garage is at least 5 feet behind the front line of the living portion of the dwelling unit. We showed on the plan all side entry units for the purposes of making sure that they would work. But we did want to clarify that the intent is, as indicated on the plan, that at least 50% of those units shall be side entry. Number 5. We don't have a defined home builder at this time. So when it comes to the material specification for the housing materials, we wanted to define something that was of high quality materials, but still left some latitude for the prospective home builder that may come in. So as we've defined it in the master deed, we said that exterior building materials will consist of brick, stone, or hardy plank siding or equivalent siding. Dimensional asphalt shingles will be used for the roofing. The front and side walls of the first story of the homes and the side walls of exposed below grade walls of homes will be covered with brick or stone. We're hoping that is a sufficient definition to make sure that you get a high quality house, but still allows us to bring in the custom builder and meet those needs that they're going to require as well. Number 6, we would like to request that we would begin the construction within 2 years of the date of final site plan approval rather than 1 year. Based on the current conditions that we're living in, we're afraid that the economics just might not be there, and we'd like to, at this point, just go straight up and ask for a 2-year extension. So in conclusion, Based on the consultant's reviews that the final PUD plans are in substantial compliance with the township's ordinance and standards, and with our proposed clarifications, we respectfully request your recommendation for final PUD approval subject to OHM and GIFL's letters as amended. We're available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate your overview of the final plans in front of us. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to our professionals to get their feedback on their review letters. Who would like to start out?
I'll start, Mr. Chair.
Cool.
Rod Arroyo with Giffords Webster. Okay, so we're going to go over our April 24th review letter that addresses this final review of the PUD for Silver Bell Point. So I'm going to hit some of the highlights just as I go through. I think you've gotten a brief overview in terms of the history of the project that's been through the preliminary process. They have reduced the number of lots as the applicant has indicated, and the 4-acre donation has also been indicated. I would note that just for your information, they are proposing that the streets would be built as private streets built to public standards. There's 28 developable acres out of the 73.4 total acres. And some variable density credits have been applied to this particular site. And there was also some discussion by the applicant about the safety path. I'm going to principally defer to the township engineer to address that comment, but the applicant is asking that they not do any extension that goes beyond their frontage. So that's an item for discussion with the Planning Commission and with input from the township engineer as well. Moving on to some additional comments. There's also a discussion about the tree replacement and the tree fund. This is a topic that we are working to learn the interpretation of how this has been applied by the township in the past. The applicant has made an adjustment in terms of the number of trees that they believe is necessary to meet this requirement, and I would just suggest that as long as that can be verified administratively before this goes to township board, I think that's fine. One item I'd like to put on the Planning Commission's checklists of things to do is to revisit this ordinance and craft it so that it clearly reflects, I think, what the township is attempting to accomplish when plans come through. I think there's probably some adjustments that could be made to make this so that it's easier to administer and so that it reflects what I believe the township is looking to accomplish. Moving on to the next section. I'm not going to get into wetlands in detail. I know that township engineer will generally address that. So I'm not going to, the applicant will clearly need to follow all requirements and if necessary, get appropriate Eagle permits. In terms of open space, we do note that the applicant is meeting the minimum open space requirement. One issue we had in terms of open space E, we noticed when you look at the Exhibit B from the condominium documents that E is not indicated as a general common element. Normally, open spaces such as that are part of a general common element. So I guess that'd be a question for the applicant as to whether or not that was an oversight or if there's something different that's being proposed for that open space E. Which is located in the interior block of the actual developed portion of the project. The other question regarding open space is it sounds like the applicant is looking to have the open space all pretty much as passive. And the Planning Commission can determine the appropriate amount of usable open space that would fit this project and whether or not there's any other amenities that are necessary for that to meet what your expectations are. So that might be an item for discussion. The applicant answered and clarified the question regarding the side entry garages. So it appears now that they are proposing that 50% will in fact be side entry garages. The building material issue, also the applicant addressed that. I think that's something that the Planning Commission should discuss in terms of their comfort level with just establishing the building material information that is being proposed by the applicant, or whether you would want someone in the township, whether it's the Planning Commission or whether it be done administratively, whether there would be at some point in the future a review of building elevations and building materials, so that there's some assurance that the intent of the township is in fact realized when homes develop on the site. So we've identified a few concerns related to that, and that would be an item for Planning Commission discussion. Also, the construction schedule was an item in our review. It looks like the applicant is asking for a delay so that they can start construction in 2 years. And then I guess another question would be, what would be the anticipated build out time once they commence construction? So that's a summary of the comments we have with our letter. And Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate an overview of the various items and your different findings there. And we'll continue with Mr. Landis, if you want to give it an overview of your findings as well on the proposed final plans.
Unmute myself, sorry.
There you go, no problem.
Okay. Our letter of April 16th was our second review of the final PUD plans. As mentioned by the applicant, we've been working with their engineer pretty extensively to modify the plan from its initial submittal. And I think everybody's familiar enough with the site. I'll just jump ahead to our competing comments. Overall, it was our opinion that the plan is in substantial compliance with the township ordinances and engineering standards. We had 5 outstanding items, which I'll read through here real quick. One was that a Orion Township Wetland Permit application be submitted for review and approval. Number 2, that the proposed 8-foot wide safety path across the Joslin Road frontage is currently shown be extended north to connect with a pathway along Silverbell Road. That comment has been on previous reviews during concept and our initial final PUD, and that's on there because of feedback received from the Safety Path Advisory Committee that is a desired element of this PUD. So we've left that in our letter. And for clarification, we would look to have that pathway extended along the east side of Joslin Road. So I know there's some confusion as on that matter. 3 was our recommendation that the township require the developer to clear and grade Jam Road for emergency access rather than accept the monetary donation offered. In addition, we recommend that a provision be included in the master deed requiring the HOA to maintain this section of Jam Road. Just a little further insight on that. We did have discussions with the road commission. They felt that was a fair and reasonable way to get this critical piece of roadway, which has not been maintained for the years, to initially get maintained, upgraded, and then ensure that it gets maintained in the future. The developer will just be able to pull up a permit from the road commission for the initial work, and then the HOA would have to hire a contractor who would also pull a permit in the future for subsequent improvements. Number 4, the emergency access detour plan that they show or had Corinth Road included in there. That is a private road, so we're asking that that be removed from that emergency route. And then number 5, there was just a couple of conflicting pavement cross sections on the plans. We're asking that they delete the secondary private road cross section, which was in conflict with the full width section from the plans. So that is all that we had. Happy to answer any questions or clarify anything that I can do.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn it over to my fellow commissioners, anything else from the applicant before I have Ms. Gerling change the screen so I can see everyone? Yes. Ms. Gerling.
You have reviews from the fire department?
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Some other reviews and from the public service statement as well. And we also have the fire marshal with us this evening. Good evening, Mr. Williams. You want to give us an overview of your letter and findings?
Yeah, we completed our review. It was dated 4/15/2020. There was 3 items on our list. The first one was per the International Fire Code D107.1. Since the dwelling units exceed 30, and there is one way into the subdivision and one way out, they are required to be fire suppressed. We also worked with OHM and the recommendations that they had in regards to the emergency access drive. And we also added some notes on there for the no parking fire lane signage on the access drives.
Thank you. Really appreciate you joining us, giving an overview of the findings there. And then we also did receive a letter from our public service director, who stated that they have no further comments at this time after this latest review and have no further concerns that address the others. Then the road commission also provided us with a letter as well, which I'm sure the applicants received with regards to their qualifications, requirements, obviously when working in their road right away and so forth, which obviously we have the Open County Road right there in Joslyn. With that, now I'll turn it back over to the applicant before I open up to my fellow commissioners. Anything you want to comment or add before I turn over to my fellow commissioners based on their professionals' reviews or anything else to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The adjusting Rod's comments, the Exhibit B's, the open space area E was indeed an oversight on our part. That will be a common element. So we'll make that revision. With regard to the building materials, we're willing to work with the township administratively to further refine that. We could take care of that during the master deed process, so that we have language that would tweak that to your satisfaction. And indeed, we are preparing a wetland permit to submit to both the township and Eagle. With regards to the fire department comments, at the beginning of the project, we talked about secondary access points and 2 means of egress. And what we had resolved during the preliminary stages was that the entrance would be a boulevard entrance, and then these would serve as 2 points of access. So with that, I think we've resolved the 2 points of access over 30 units. And at this point, we do not plan on fire suppressing the homes as a requirement of the development. Other than that, I think covers the comments that I heard.
Okay. With that, I'll look to my fellow commissioners and then circle back to, I guess, my comments and things. Anyone want to kick us off? Raise your hand and what you got. Yes, thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to circle back to the fire marshal's comments while we still have them. Would the 2 points of access be addressed by having a boulevard entry, or I believe, don't they have to be separated by a certain distance? Guess that's a question to Mr. Williams.
Sure, yeah. Mr. Williams, you know, with regards to the, we'll give him a moment there.
Kids and dogs.
Yeah, right.
Why he's getting settled again, I guess I'll go through a couple of comments that I have.
Hey, Scott, I'm available now. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Kids and dogs for sure.
Oh, both.
In regards to that, the fire code does it does have description on that as well. When it does talk about secondary access and 2 access points, a boulevard entrance does not meet the requirements of the International Fire Code. There are specific requirements that basically say for a secondary access point, it needs to be basically, if you were to split the site in 2, that the secondary access point needs to be on the opposite end of the site, which obviously a boulevard entrance does not account for that.
Okay, thank you. That was my thoughts. I didn't think that I guess properly addressed that 2 access points. So thank you for that. So I will circle around to just a couple other comments. I don't have any major issue with the safety path being within the development limits and keeping that within those parameters and not extending it up to the next intersection. And as a couple of comments that I had, I was good with the applicant keeping no contribution to the tree fund as long as the replacement factor can stay on the site. I'm still a little open to the jam responsibility, the jam road responsibility for access. I can understand both sides of it, but would like to discuss that a little bit more. And I was good with the building material comments and the way that they're written out right now, that a hardy material along with stone or brick, and the way it was described, I think is a decent parameter. I still would be open to see elevations, I guess, in the future for administrative approval, just to acknowledge that those are parameters are still being met. And one other comment would just be is I would be open to the 2-year build window as long as there's a reasonable time frame from the start of construction to ending construction. Just having experience in the industry right now, it's a little shaky, and could understand why it wouldn't start for a year, maybe 2. That's it for now.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and on the multiple matters. Thank you. Other fellow commissioners, comments, questions for the applicant or professionals? Yes, Mr. Steimel.
A couple things. I'm not that enamored about giving a 2-year extension right off the bat. I just don't think you want to set a precedence like that. I think it'd be perfectly understandable if they do need to come back for an extension. It's not that big a deal to request one, and conditions are the way they are, then it should be granted. I don't want to get into starting with an approval of a project that we start granting extensions right off the bat. Everybody start asking for longer time periods, and there's a reason that everything's in there right now the way it is. So that just on that subject, I guess I agree a little bit. It wasn't offered as one of the public benefits, and so I think extending the safety path beyond their borders isn't really part of this, and I'm fine that it's not there right now. I understand that from before what we looked at. We're also getting that property on Silver Bell, so I think we're covered there. And the building material thing, that might be a little tricky. You might have to come right out and define like a small committee that would review once the project come. How would you administratively review it? You might want to define that, Tammy, what everybody's okay with. Is that you and somebody from the building department and maybe one other person, that you review them administratively or not, you know?
Mm-hmm. Ms. Gurley? Thoughts,
That
comments?
does pose a bit of a challenge. You know, if a neighborhood's approved and planning and zoning is out of the picture and, you know, it's then at the building department and they're just looking at, you know, if it's going in slowly in different homes, I don't want to say out of sight, out of mind. It never is. It's a PUD, but it's from one department to another department. I have seen in the past where there's something outlined in the PUD agreement with the degree of building materials that are required, and then that PUD agreement is on file in the building department, can reference it. So it does add a bit of a challenge in my opinion, not saying it can't be done, but I think another way to handle it would, if there is one, it would be preferred for me.
Thank you. Fellow commissioners, comments, questions, or thoughts on the time frame? Yes, Ms. Ryan.
Would it be possible, since the objection was raised because they don't have a contractor selected yet or a developer, could we just say they need to bring it back to the planning commission once they have a developer and they have proposed plans for approval at that point?
I guess something we could look at or consider. Ms. Gurley, thoughts on that or other? And I'll go to
If that was entertained, I would want definitely clarity, because in that it's a PUD, planning commission is a recommending body, township board is the approving body. There are minor and major PUD modifications. A minor, it only goes to planning commission, major goes to the township board, and architecture, if it's part of the approval, can be considered a major alteration. So I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I just think it needs to be really explicit, the course it needs to take, if that's the way we're handling it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Steinwell.
Now, Tammy, I can't remember if you were around for this or not, but we had a similar situation in Stonegate, especially Stonegate East, because it was multiple builders that went in there. They were kind of selling the lots as they went. And I'm not sure how the building department handled that. I thought they did kind of do a review to make sure that the whatever then when a style of home was going to be built, that it matched the general criteria.
I was here. I don't recall that. What sticks out in my memory, I wasn't here, but I've read about it many times, and it'll probably ring a bell for you, John, was Orion Village Crossing. The townhomes and back had a certain criteria. It was a PUD, but they did, as their community benefit, say that it was superior architecture. So when they came in and said, we now don't want the chimneys, it did have to come back because their architecture, it was considered as superior architecture. It was very subjective, and planning commission had to make a determination whether they were going to agree to the alterations to it. But I don't remember on Stonegate, but Stonegate is a consent judgment, and it had 5 or 6 modifications. So that one is definitely papers that I take out and read every time there's a change to it.
Thank you for that. Mr. Walker. Oh, still muted.
That was my best part too. Too bad you missed that. I have empathy for the petitioner in that they were here, I think back in June was the last time. And I was, I think, instrumental in, I voted against what they wanted. I'm trying to now vote for what they want, but I'm not sure I'm convinced yet. I'm not sure I'm convinced because the fact that they don't have a builder. Obviously, if it got to us a year ago, this project's been going on for some time. There's not a commitment to the construction, the exterior construction. The Jam Road reluctance to take care of that bothers me, and the fire marshal's comments bother me. So if the petitioner would like to address any of that, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback there. We'll give the applicant another chance here in a minute if there's any other comments from my commissioners. Mr. Gross.
Yes, relative to the safety path, if the applicant does not feel that he's able to construct the safety path up to Silver Bell, would it not be appropriate to have a donation to the safety path fund be considered in lieu thereof, so that safety paths can be maintained in the future? Secondly, relative to the building materials, I liked what the applicant said in his opening comments about the types of materials that is being proposed. I think that should be incorporated into the planned unit development agreement, into Article 5, Section 5.7, where he talks about building materials. And then if we can resolve a method as to how the actual elevations would be reviewed, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
Thank you. How about I'll turn over to the applicant for a moment. We've heard some of the comment from my fellow commissioners. Anything further to add, or based on the fire marshal's comments, maybe start there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To respectfully disagree with the fire department's comment, we've done multiple sites in multiple communities that utilize the boulevard entrance as a secondary entrance. Again, we went through these discussions with both the township engineer, as well as I thought the fire department, to clarify these issues in the preliminary PUD process. There were discussions about putting a secondary access, if it was feasible or not. And this was the final determination that we had all agreed upon, that was approved at the PUD, at the preliminary PUD stage. So I didn't realize this item was going to come up again, because I thought it was resolved. With regards to building materials, we can certainly, we've got the materials identified in the master deed, and we can certainly include those same descriptions in the PUD agreement. And again, I'll just reiterate with respect to Jam Road that this is a public road. It's a gravel road, similar to what would happen if a public constituent would call the township and indicate that the roads weren't being maintained. That would be deferred to the road commission to maintain. So this is something that's already their responsibility. And we can certainly assist with contacting the road commission on the township's behalf, or as a local resident, and request that they maintain it. We, in good faith, make sure that it was in proper condition for the time of our site development. Wanted to at least offer up that we would take care of this to make sure it's maintained, or make sure it's up to grade, and that the fire department would need at the time of the development. But you know, this is kind of like saying we'd like you to fix the potholes on Joslyn Road from our site to Silver Bell in perpetuity. It's in our opinion it already has a responsible party. I think that if there were issues with regards to this when it was originally developed, when the road commission purchased the lot, that and there wasn't an agreement with the original subdivision, that wasn't an issue then, and I don't think should be an issue now. I think that we lean on the road commission to do their job within their public right of way. Was there anything else that I missed?
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, if I could comment on something.
Sure.
The suppression requirements were noted in every single fire department review that has been completed on this property.
Thank you for that. So I guess that's one of the bigger issues. If your boulevard's not gonna, satisfy the circulation, you don't want to suppress them. I mean, would you look to suppress them or is there a way to rework the road or?
At this time, quite honestly, I don't have a response for you. I've done several projects. I'm thinking we've done projects within Orion as well previously that have served the same situation. The requirement the requirement to fire suppress is a request of the fire code, not a requirement. I know that the fire department, and with all due respect, I know the fire department requested on most of the reviews, as do most communities, but it is as long as two means of access are provided, it is a request, not a requirement of the code. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
If I could,
Yeah, sure.
I respectfully disagree with that. International Fire Code is our adopted ordinance. Give me 1 second here. Sorry, I'm working off of a cell phone. But the exact code requirement comes out of subsection D 107.1. And that is where the requirement comes from in regards to the 30 dwelling units with one access drive that leads in and out. If you can also recall, we have had past projects over the past few years, one being Stadium Ridge residential, where we did run into the same situation, and they are adding or did approve of adding fire suppression into the homes.
Thank you for that. I guess turn over to my fellow commissioners. Stay with the hot topic button of the fire. Thoughts, comments? Mr. Reynolds.
I think it's a big issue. I don't think it's a request. It's something that we've required of other developments. They've either provided two means of access points if they're over the 30 dwellings, I believe is the mark, or they've suppressed their units. So I don't really see any question on that topic. It's our adopted ordinance, and it's what we've asked for other developments in similar scenarios to provide.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Further comments on or questions relates to the fire matter? Not seeing many. How about the road? Maybe a little easier. What are we thinking on Jam Road and the maintenance and what they propose and so forth? Mr. Gross?
Yes. Excuse me, relative to Ham Road, I think it's improved, once it's improved as an access, that it should not be the responsibility of the condominium association to maintain that. It's completely off-site, and I think it'd be very difficult to have a condominium association be responsible to maintain that road in perpetuity once it's had its improvement. Now, there's been a $10,000 apparently contribution to having that road improved. I don't know how much it would cost, but I think if we can get it improved so there's access to it, then that should be the end of it without any further responsibility of the association to maintain it.
Thank you. Any further thoughts on the the road. How about the building timeline and,
If I could speak on the access road.
sure, Mr. Williams?
From a fire department standpoint, just as long as the commission understands, that access drive is required in the case or scenario that a train was to use those tracks. It is an access drive that's been located there for a long period of time. And as you can see, we have taken a few visits out there. It is not being maintained from that aspect. It's just something that has to be kept in mind, that during the winter months, having this snow plowed, obviously the trees that have grown, we need to try to keep a vertical clearance of right around 14 feet. So those are just some of the things that we have to try to keep in mind in regards to having that emergency access drive maintained.
Thank you. Appreciate the context and it's been on site and so forth. Thank you. What about the 2-year time frame as proposed? Worried about setting a precedent? You go with the 1 year. Comments, thoughts, Ms. Skirling?
I wasn't sure I understood the request. Was the request for 2 years to start or 2 years to complete?
2 years to start.
2 years to start, okay.
Mhm. I guess I'll give some of my comments. Saying that, I'll work backwards. So I think, fairly common, obviously, for folks to come back for renewals. I don't really want to start out setting a precedent or giving 2 years, a la carte initially. We've been, very reasonable, I believe, in the past and so forth, and market conditions. And, things may change in 30 days too. I guess we don't know what a year will do. The road, the one-time contribution is proposed. I think that's, adequate. They're stepping up saying, hey, with the construction, we're doing access, we'll, assist, but I understand, I don't think they should be in perpetuity, on the line for that road. As relates to the materials, I think what's proposed so far, based with what's in writing, we come up with a, kind of name committee or array about it. I think there's a way to do it without naming the builder. I think we can get, all but, naming the builder with regards to what they've already stated, and then how we have a process to, third party validate or, without putting the department out on a limb. And then, Ms. Gerling, what are your thoughts on that? Can you do it?
Yeah, my feelings are if it's really explicit in the PUD agreement, it gives the material, it's got to have whatever percentage of whatever material, a minimum square footage of X, this type of design is as explicit as it can be, then I would think that, yeah, between the building department and myself, when a plan comes in, that we can make sure it meets that. But I would ask again that it be as explicit as possible.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that feedback. If we don't want to go somewhere if we can't manage it, so okay. And then the fire marshal's comments. I mean, we've had others developments similar that have gone through the same requirements and rework the roads or suppress. I don't think there's much way around it. Further comments from my commissioners? Mr. Gross, yes.
Yeah, relative to the time frame, I believe the land unit development ordinance does provide for a construction project to commence within 1 year of the date of the agreement. And I don't think we have the ability to waive that, although we can provide for extensions after the 1 year. So I think it's kind of a moot point to ask for 2 when we can't grant it, but we can grant an extension at some point in time, future date.
Yes, Ms. Gerling.
if you have anything else to discuss, I can verify that. I thought that there was a clause that it was 1 year. You could get additional 1 year's extensions. There was something in there, and that's why I asked if it was clarification on extending 1 year to start or extension on construction, because one of the two does say that it can be extended as long as the planning commission approves it when they're going through approval. So if you get another item to discuss, I can look for that language and get the clarification.
Okay, great, thank you. Further comments from my fellow commissioners? Mr. Simon.
I have a question on the Jam Road thing. I think their comment was almost like a safety path. They just want to make a contribution, and then it's up to the township to make the improvements to that access road. Is that what I understand is being proposed?
I thought they're still gonna make the access road from the development, and you have the contribution to kind of bring it back up to snuff or whatever may be for a one-time fix. I guess that's the applicant to clarify. And then also on the time frame as well, just so we're all on the same page.
You ready for me to chime in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, give us a little clarity on those and anything else. Appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I'm looking at the screen. I want to let you know my name is not Brenda, it's David. Represent Franklin Ridge Homes. I'm using my wife's go-to meeting right now. I want to thank all of you for the time you spent tonight to work on this, as well as the previous time that you spent to get us to this stage. And we're really excited to be a part of Orion and part of this development. And I'm listening to everybody's comments, and we are taking them to heart. And we care very much about the success of this development. And part of its success will be because it's in Orion. And we recognize that. So we want to work together with the commission to come up with a project that really is successful in everybody's eyes. So to that extent, I'm going to try, I didn't write numbers down in the notes, but I did write some notes with the various commissioners who sent this evening. And I understand that you have your 1 year commence construction. And I heard Commissioner Steinwell mention that we, asking for an extension, and Ms. Gerling saying, that that's not out of the ordinary or unusual. What's unusual right now is the pandemic. And just to give you a frame of reference, we have two different subdivisions. One was by a publicly traded home builder who was supposed to buy from us and close on April 6th. They canceled on April 3rd. And Pulte Homes canceled a contract with us that they have with us on another community outside of Orion this week. So we've had two deals that we have to kind of go back to the drawing board on. And that was kind of why we were thinking, we don't know where this is headed. We don't know if they're going to have a resurgence of the pandemic next winter. And we thought 2 years might give us an opportunity not have to take more of everybody's time again in a year. But out of respect for what you already have in writing, we certainly can live with the year. We want to sell it within the year. And we're only talking to quality builders. Like I mentioned, the last two transactions I've worked on are both with publicly traded home builders. So we would live with the 12 months if that would make things right with the community. The second issue regarding Jam Road, I did two things. I specifically spoke with Jennifer at the Oakland County Road Commission yesterday and confirmed that they do own Jam Road, including the section that seems to be a subject right now, and that they consider themselves responsible for maintaining that, which includes snow removal, grading in the summer, and brush hogging of any kind of debris or any trees that are growing into the area they need so that it provides safe passage. What we did offer was a dollar amount to regrade the road, but if it's more comfortable for the commission, we will commit that when we're developing our site, we'll have those same people come in and grade Jam Road and pull back the brush hog so that it's passable. But they don't have a problem, the county agreeing to maintain it thereafter. And if, again, I forget how long Jam Road is, but it's a half a mile. And I think the area that we're talking about is about 125 feet long. I drove it again today before this meeting just to see how it looked. There's some dips in the road. There's some emergency signs on either side of this subject area of Jam Road. But ironically, a pickup truck, somebody who looks like they locally live in the area, passed me the other way going through it. So it looks like the neighbors are using it, passing it. But if that would make the commission more comfortable, we're more than happy to say, forget about $10,000. We're just going to make it right. And the Oakland County Road Commission is, understands and agrees it's their responsibility to maintain it thereafter. And anything as simple as a phone call would rectify that in the future. We talked about the safety path, and what I'm thinking is, if it's acceptable to the commission, that the $10,000 that we offered for the Jam Road, we'll take care of Jam Road, and we would take that $10,000 and offer that. One of the commissioners mentioned setting up a fund for the safety path maintenance in the future, and we would be happy to contribute that $10,000 towards the safety path, if that would help. So I think the only remaining open issue, correct me if I'm wrong, is the question about fire suppression. And I feel bad because we've worked very carefully. We're very concerned about safety for all. We were under the understanding that both creating the Jam Road access point for secondary access in from the south versus the north to the site and the boulevard did comply with what's in writing. And I certainly respect what the fire marshal is saying this evening. Little caught off guard because I'd like to research it more, and would suggest that we would have a better understanding before the board would have a vote, if that would be acceptable. Did I miss anything?
Those are the main items, Ms. Gerling.
I did look that up. And so what the ordinance says under the PUD section is that you need to start construction within a year of the approval. And so the process has always been that you get to the point that you're through engineering, you've paid your performance guarantees, and you basically pull a permit, which can be your soil erosion. That stops the 1-year clock. Then you have a 2-year clock to finish construction, and that is under the site plan section. And it says construction must be completed within 2 years of approval unless a longer time period is requested by the applicant at the time of the plan approval. So it's not unusual, as the Planning Commission knows, for us to have somebody get a site plan approval and them come in and ask for an extension, and the ordinance does allow that. The asking at the time of approval is on the length of the construction period itself.
Thank you. I'll take it back to my fellow commissioners. I guess the biggest item, just go for it. What are on the fire, Mr. Steimel?
I like the comments he said about the Jam Road. I think that makes more sense to me, that they should just do the little bit of maintenance work like he's talking about, why they already have equipment out there. Because otherwise, I don't know if that 10th, we do it as a separate project. Part of the cost is, as you know, is having Pumper basically get their equipment into the area and stuff. And that's an added cost, that I'm not sure the $10,000 covers it. And I don't even think that OHM, kind of like a safety path, is really looked at to say, yeah, we could do that required work for 10 grand. So I'd much rather just prefer you as part of this, while you're doing your other road work, that you just make the slight maintenance improvements on Jam Road rather than a donation. I like that. And I mean, probably means just taking that note off the thing, and we know the improvements will be made.
And in regards to that, if I can speak on that, what we can do, if that's the direction that the commission wants to go in, obviously, if we find any situations or anything that hinders our access down that emergency access drive, we can always work hand in hand with Oakland County to get it addressed.
Thank you. Appreciate that. What are folks' belief on the access for the fire and/or requiring suppression? Where we want to go with this overall, on that particular point? Yes, Mr. Gross.
Mr. Williams, what kind of a cost are we talking about for fire suppression in a single family house?
And I wish I could give exact numbers on that. That is probably one of the questions that I don't have the answer on. I do know from a state aspect, also from a federal aspect, also there were incentives and tax incentives in regards to adding suppression to homes. In regards to pricing, that's really the only information that I can offer at this time.
It certainly would be a benefit relative to their insurance, I guess.
Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, much across the state, if not the entire country, everything is moving towards, more life safety features, both in the commercial aspect and the residential aspect. But, fire code addresses this situation because one of the biggest things to pay attention to is if something did happen in front of that boulevard entrance, let's say it may be a car accident, something in regards that would block our access. The whole mindset behind the fire suppression system is that it basically has the ability to either extinguish or, delay the fire growth until the fire department can get access to that dwelling unit and be able to extinguish the fire.
Scott may know, I'd say about $2 a foot on a new build is what you're looking at. Looking at the other, MEP type stuff, when I've seen probably $2 a foot somewhere, give or take, Mr. Reynolds.
I get it that it's an added cost to the project, but I just circle back to a requirement that we regulated and we required of Stadium Ridge to have in a similar situation. I don't see this any different, and it's our adopted, regulation. So I get it that we have asked for some improvements on jam and a few things, but I was never under the impression that we're allowing suppression not to occur because of an access improvement that was going to occur.
And lack of comments on the other side of it, I think seems overall consensus that there's not a whole lot of leeway from this commission on either reworking a road or requiring the suppression this time.
Yeah, those are two different subjects, right?
I'm sorry, I meant, you could overcome the suppression if you reworked his roads.
Oh,
right? So.
Yes, correct. Just to make it clear, and in this past review and the ones and beyond that, they are two separate issues. Basically, the Jam Road Emergency Access Drive is to address the situation if the train tracks were to become an issue. That gives us access to the site. And then the boulevard entrance, or the one way in, one way out of the site, is the second issue that we're running into. If the applicant was able to provide some type of emergency access drive that came out to another area of the subdivision or another road, that would basically take off the requirement, and it would no longer need to have the fire suppression inside homes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
It's John Thompson again. I think we have a question of interpretation, and I guess I'd like to further offer that if we had a recommendation subject to the legal interpretation of the fire code. I'm in total agreement with everything the fire marshal has indicated with respect to the fire suppression. If you only have one means, again, our difference in opinion is that the boulevard serves as the two means of egress. So maybe we could deal with that between now and the board meeting and see if we can't come to resolution.
Okay. Something to look at, or, based on, we're a recommending body, so we could recommend denial on it based on that and come up with a solution, or. Yes, Andy.
Thank you. It's Andy Milley. I'm a development consultant for Mr. Stoyer. I think rather than, if this is the only remaining issue, that we would look forward to a recommendation with this particular issue to be studied by the township attorney and the applicant's attorney before it goes to the board. So rather than deny it, we look for a recommendation with this being properly interpreted. So if it was interpreted that it had to be done, then that would be what the board would be vote on. If it was interpreted that it was not a requirement, then the board could vote on it that way.
Ms. Gerling, any thoughts on the attorney weighing in before it moves forward based on that sort of recommendation?
I don't really, yes, I would feel that the planning commission can make a recommendation. And this be a criteria. How you're going to word it is how you word it, but it would definitely have to be something worded properly so that the motion going to the board, they completely understand what the issue is and what they do depending on the outcome. So, your recommendation, you have a recommendation. Is your recommendation to approve? Would it be to approve with the exception of this? Or, a motion maker is going to know, but I think there's a way to formulate your recommendation that could incorporate this, but it's got to be clear for the township board to understand. I guess is what I would, if that made sense.
If someone wants to do it that way. All right, fair enough. Thank you.
And if that's the direction that the commission wants to go, I'm perfectly fine with that. I can work with our township attorney, provide all the documentation to him that's specifically explains where the code requirements come from and the subsections in the code book that they fall under.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yes, Ms. Gerling.
I didn't know if the planner had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable that if that's an issue that an applicant is asking that there be some type of clarification, that you could make a recommendation subject to that issue being explored in more detail with the township attorney prior to the township board taking final action. And then once the township board has it, they'll have that recommendation. I've seen that many times. I don't think that's problematic. You're basically trying to make sure everyone's clear what the actual requirements are, and you can. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Okay. Thank you. What's my fellow commissioners' thoughts, comments, or I guess I'll entertain a motion if you know which way you want to go with it. If you want to include that or not, or any other questions for the applicant. Ms. Gerling?
I just had requests on whichever way the motion goes, that there were a number of things that the applicant agreed to in relation to comments from the consultants that are not depicted on the plans or noted on the plans yet. So I would just request that it be part of the motion so that it does get incorporated as within the plans.
Thank you. Good point. There's been a lot of healthy discussion and a number of things agreed to, so thank you. And make sure we try to capture that in the motion. Comments, questions for the applicant? If not, entertain a motion or take a more census on the which way we want to go.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Relative to PC 2019-16, Silverbell Point Land Unit Development, Final Plan and Agreement for properties identified in the application. I will move that the Planning Commission give favorable consideration to the plans dated March the 24th, 2020 for the following reasons in the findings of fact. One is that the plan is in compliance with the planned unit development concept by congregating housing units on a building area of approximately 25 acres out of a 74-acre site and preserving the wetlands, woodlands, and open space to the maximum extent possible. And the applicant has reduced the density from an initial application of 50 units to 46 units. And of the 74 acres, approximately 49 acres, which includes a 4-acre park donation, are in a preservation mode. Secondly, the planned unit development is compatible with adjacent residential properties and does not have access through any of those adjoining subdivisions. 3, the addition of 46 additional residences should not have a negative impact on Joslin Road. 4, the preservation of 49 acres of the site plus an additional 5.79 acres or 20% of the site is identified as open space provided for the protection of the natural environment. 5, the plan is in compliance with all applicable township and county requirements. And 6, the planned unit development plan is in compliance with the township master plan. This favorable recommendation is subject to the review and approval of the planned unit development agreements by the township attorney, and to include a resolution on the fire suppression system and or building entrance, boulevard entrance, be resolved prior to the plan being reviewed by the township board. Secondly, is that the Article 5, Section 5.7 of the planned unit development agreement include the addition of building materials which were identified and recommended by the applicant and the petitioner this evening, and that a review of the elevations be incorporated to include the planning director and building official when plans are submitted for individual buildings. And 3, that there be a submission and approval of a wetland permit.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there support?
I'll support.
Motion and support. Discussion on the motion. Yes, Mr. Simon.
Did we want to add a couple things to clarify? One would be that we're going to remove that note about making a donation to the township for the Jam Road, and instead the maintenance to be done on the Jam Road access would be done as part of the project. And I think 2 was the developer said that they didn't need to make a contribution to the tree fund for the few remaining trees. They were just going to adjust their landscape plan. I thought that's what I heard. So we didn't have to go through this tree fund thing that's currently on the plans. Am I wrong on those 2 items?
No.
Thank you.
Correct on both.
I would like to incorporate the fact that the initial review of the Jam Road would be done during the construction of the project and improvements made by the developer, and that the $10,000 contribution would be to the safety path fund of the township. And what was your last one, John?
Is about the tree replacement. Right now, there's a note that says they're going to contribute to the fund, and I think they said they don't need to. They can incorporate the few trees that they're short. That's what I remember hearing. So
that the landscape plan be adjusted accordingly.
Yeah,
and I amend my support with that.
Ms. Gerling, something to add? Yes,
I
Ms.
believe it
Gurley?
might be what the planner was gonna say, that then I would think that the planner has to re-review that landscape plan.
Correct. Yeah, subject to verification of those new numbers. Yeah, absolutely.
And the other comment I had was, is the planning commission comfortable enough? I understand materials and again, maybe this involves the planner because he called out the concern in his review. Is there anything additional needed to ensure the, again, I've got no problem looking at plans when they come in, but is there another ingredient that could be put into, a minimum square footage, something that again, we're verifying when a plan comes in for an individual house on the architecture.
The applicant, at this initial presentation, provided some more details in terms of the types of materials and the amount of brick, et cetera, would be required, and that has not been incorporated into the current plan but agreement. So I think if he provided that additional information, it would be very helpful.
And Mr. Chair, yeah, that was basically my comment. We heard some additional details tonight. So if the applicant can make sure those are clarified and provided ahead of time before the township board meeting, and all of that can be, in writing, and we know what we're dealing with. Yeah, it should be fine. It should be it should clarify some of those questions that have been asked.
Yes, Ms. Gurley?
And I just was looking for clarification on the motion where it said that the fire suppression boulevard would be resolved prior to being sent to the board. So we want that completely resolved before I send it to the board at all.
Yes, that was the intent of the motion.
Okay. Perfect. Yes, Mr. Millen. Oh, will you unmute Andy, Ms. Gurley? Or he's muted, sorry.
I'm sorry, thank you. I think Mr. Steimel raised a good point when he clarified the jam road. I just wanted to clarify it a little bit further, that the applicant or the developer will make those improvements at the time of the subdivision is built, but then subsequent maintenance would be the responsibility of the road commission.
That's in the motion already. Mr.
Okay.
Gross added that in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
Two items that I didn't hear, and the third might have been included, so forgive me if it was. One item was the clarification that at least 50% should be side garages. The second was to modify to include area E as common space. And then I wanted to just make sure from the motion maker that we were addressing all the reviewers' comments. There were some other discussion points that the fire marshal had in his letter. Was there a blanket statement to include OHM's comments and Giffords' comments being addressed? As the applicant said tonight, they didn't have any issue addressing, I think, beyond the comment for fire, I think.
I believe all of those, or most of those, have been incorporated in the motion or in the plans. The 50% of the garage, I believe that's part of the ordinance. So I don't know if that needs to be.
Yeah, it's just there was some in one section it talked about one and then it talked about another on the plan. The plans weren't consistent, so it's just clarifying, yes, and that is an ordinance requirement.
Okay, so I think we've incorporated comments on both sides, okay. Further comments on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and now that we have a motion that's been seconded and discussed, we'll open up for any public comment on the motion. Anyone on video, please raise your hand if you have a comment. Seeing none, anyone on the phone, please state your name. And do we have anyone on the chat box or email on this matter, Ms. Gurley?
We do not.
Okay, with that, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Walker,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Diamond,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Damascus.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Thank you, applicant and everyone on that matter. We appreciate all your time and efforts.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
certainly appreciate all your efforts as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. We'll continue on with our agenda. We're on now item 7B under new business, which is PC 2019-51, which is our township initiating text amendment to zoning ordinance number 78, and we're looking at articles number 2, 33, and 34. Since we already had a great public hearing and overview on the matter, I will still turn it back over to Ron as I pull it back up. Is there anything else you want to add, or where do you want to start where we left off, or where would you like to take it?
No, I think we've had an overview. We've had quite a bit of discussion, and I guess I would open up if there's any questions. If not, then I think a motion or a recommendation to the township board would be in order.
Wonderful, excellent. I concur. So with that, I'll take to my fellow commissioners. I guess start with the first article, work our way through, or any just general comments, questions you may have on what's been proposed or went over. Anyone wants to start or has general comments? Sure, Mr. Walker.
Yeah, this is all above my pay grade, and I thought this was a very concise, a well-done amendment. And I'm wondering what the driving force is behind it. It seemed almost too convoluted and too nice. Maybe the consultant would answer that question for me.
Sure.
It's really come out of the general discussions about multiple family development. These two districts are both areas that are prime for consideration for multiple family within a mixed use context. And I think by opening the door for other multiple family housing types and clarifying some of the language in the district, it better positions developers to want to use these districts to actually incorporate more of this type of housing into mixed use projects. So I just think it was some clarifications and some updates that needed to be made to make it more attractive so that it could actually meet the township's goals and also be something that you might get some interest from the development community in using.
Thank you.
Thank you. Overall, I think even given the current status and state of affairs in the world and the state, I think the multifamily, still is going to be a pretty hot product for a while. And, in this corridor as well, I could see, more of it, especially with the boulevard and things coming in. So, I guess good time to be looking at it, since I still believe there'll be more of that product coming to town. Anyone have any particular comments, questions on the different types of dwellings and how they kind of broke it up and so forth, or some of the calculations, or Mr. Reynolds?
I was just going to say I didn't have any major comments. I was in favor of all the text amendments brought forth. I think it kind of opens ourselves up to a few more project types that are actually something that would be desirable in the township, especially in a couple of these corridors. So I think we've had some good discussion, and all our discussion points have been incorporated in these amendments.
All right, thank you. And I like the little cleanup tweaks too on some of the different the banks and so forth, and so everyone's clear on what's permitted with what and so forth. So looks pretty good. Does anyone have any comments, thoughts, or we can send it up if folks like it? Entertain a motion.
Mr.
Sure,
Chair,
Mr. Gross.
I would move that the planning commission forward a recommendation to the township board to approve and adopt PC 2019-51, which is township initiated text amendments to the zoning ordinance 78 articles 2, 33 and 34. Due to the fact that this has had extensive discussion at previous meetings with the Planning Commission, and it amends the ordinance to correct deficiencies, clarify the ordinance, and provide more flexibility in achieving the goals of the township master plan.
Support.
Okay, motion and support. Any discussion? Seeing, Mr. Steimel. Oh, still muted.
They just missed the little mic. I know we discussed this a little bit, and like I said, I think at this point, we're at a point from the planning commission to send it to the board. But with everything that's going on, we're going to kind of strategically not necessarily push it onto agenda right away. I don't think there's a real hurry for this at this time. That, you know, why things are still kind of up in the air, it might help.
The only comment I have on that is I've heard discussions, no one's sure, you know, I had on the conversation on not sending it immediately just because our cost has increased with advertising. And the comment that I'm hearing is we don't know that our old method of advertising is going to come back. So I mean, at your directive, but you know, we've taken it to this point. What I was thinking is the one that I was hanging back on is we had discussion on multifamily as a whole, that we set that on the back burner because we hadn't put all our efforts into it. We weren't all necessarily agreeing on that. That was a little bit more challenging on what we were going to do. So I was thinking that one, which we hadn't gone all the way through, would be the point that we say, okay, let's leave that at the back. But this one, I was thinking with the effort and, you know, the consultant time that we would take this one to its finish. But that was just my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you. Want to be conscientious, do a little bundle package, maybe get a BOGO. I get it. I like it. I'm a bargain shopper too. Were there thoughts? Yes, Ms. Gerling.
Just another comment that, you know, I understand how in labor intensive these are for staff to complete. And, you know, looking at it, these are 3 sections. One is just a definition. So really it's just 2 sections. So I can ask internally. I mean, the motion would still remain as it is. I would just inquire on the speed to which it is placed on an agenda. I could work around elections and workload accordingly.
Acknowledge being cognizant, so thank you. Further comments from my commissioners? Forward on with the slow roll, or looks like about heads shaking. Okay, excellent. And if I don't see any more comments, we'll go ahead and open up to the public for comments, since we do have a second motion on the floor. If there's anyone via video, raise your hand. Not seeing any. And anyone on the phone, state your name. And anyone on the chat box or an email us on this matter?
No, sir.
All right, understanding that roll, ask for roll call, please.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Gross,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Steimel,
Yes.
Damascus.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Taking us to 7C under new business, discussion of possible text amendment. We're gonna do more after that discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the supervisor received an email, which is included in your packet, from a citizen. He can't just change the ordinance, so he referred her to me to refer to you. You know, the ordinance does allow for anyone to propose a text amendment with an application and a fee. The fee is $1,050. So what I said to them, and I do see she's in attendance here, is that as a courtesy, we would have a general discussion on what she's proposing. By all means, you know, we can't stop somebody from applying, but I thought it would be beneficial for her to hear discussion on this and before she, if she decides to proceed with the text amendment. So you have before you that email that goes into the request of a change on in the ordinance. I've also given you the pages that pretty much pertain to how the ordinance reads right now. You know, and a lot of it goes into definitions. There's also an article that she had provided, but looking at the different sections of the ordinance, as I said, definitions play heavily into you know, the ordinance. So, you know, one of the definitions is actually the first one I see is private stable, but I would like to go to livestock, which livestock says horses, cattle, sheep, goats, and other useful animals normally kept or raised on a farm. So to this point, the township's interpretation has been that poultry is something that is used within a farm, so it goes under the definition of livestock, which you then refer to a private stable, and it says, you know, that it would be within a private stable. However, you have to have 2.5 acres for the first horse or animal and 1 additional acre for each additional. So to this point, our poultry handling has been that if you have 2.5 acres, you can have 1 chicken, and it would take an additional acre to get the second chicken. And then going within your, within the uses, within what I've provided to you, the property in question is in our R1, 2, and 3, which has as an allowed use poultry, rabbits, sheep, and goats. Again, those in a category of livestock by the definitions, kept as an accessory use in a non-commercial basis for the use of the on the premise, that it is a special land use, but it does then have a footnote talking about the required acreage. There is the ability, because she does not meet the acreage, another option for her is to apply for a variance on the acreage number. But you know, right now, I just was looking for your feelings on this text needing to be modified. I also gave the SFSRSE section, which doesn't, and it might be an error in our actual charts, doesn't get into, you know, the SFSRSE by nature are larger land areas than our R1, 2, and 3 districts. And within our use chart, you get into private stables, which circles back to livestock, which circles back to the 2.5 acres, but explicitly listed under accessory is not the poultry and the others that are listed in R1, 2, and 3. So that's just a summarization of what is in the ordinance now, and you have before you the email correspondence. So here again, it was more for discussion. I don't want to, it's a courtesy. I'm sorry. I didn't want to direct her to submit an application at that price if the conversation is that, you know, you feel that this ordinance is the way it should be, and you know, it's still her option to incur that cost and go through the process. But as a courtesy, I just thought a discussion was the good starting point.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate the context and overview. And then obviously we received the information from the citizen with these articles and so forth. So with that, I'll open it up to my commissioners and their initial comments, thoughts, suggestions, and so forth as it relates to the overall livestock or chickens in particular, I guess. And I know just recently the village of Oxford was going through an ordinance, I think, on chicken coops as well, if I recall. Mr. Simon, something to start?
Let me click on the right button before I start talking this time. Didn't we, I mean, the current way it's set up and the criteria, I thought we kind of went through that within the last 2 years. We were kind of talking about it under the Right to Farm Act, and we did make some changes. Now, I could be wrong. It needs a little research. So, you know, that's how we came up with the criteria you see now. And so it's like, I'd like to revisit all that to see, you know, why we did at the time. Plus, I know, based on this, the request is kind of a more timely thing. A text amendment is going to take some time, and it's not really going to help the situation. I don't know if it's ever happened or not, whether she can be granted some people can be granted a temporary thing because it's something for right now. That's really the object right now, and it's timely. I think reading those emails, I kind of want a timely answer, not something that's going to take a year, before we get through it all, the whole process. As you can see, text amendments take a while. We got to go through it and back and forth, and then we got to come up with some stuff, and we got to hold a public hearing, and then we make a recommendation to the board, right, and stuff like that. So it takes a little while.
And it does. Mr. Reynolds.
This was something that the village was discussing, and I believe when I was on the commission, how we had moved forward, and correct me if someone has more current information, but we had proposed it as a kind of test pilot. We had a certain number of applicants that were considering it and helped clarify, having, I guess, yard chickens. But I know some other ordinances, local, Oxford was kind of doing the same thing. They're doing it on like a year basis to try it out. So, I'm slightly indifferent with it, but I think it is something that we need to at least really kind of be refined on if we are going to allow it. I personally wasn't in favor of it after I kind of processed all the information, but obviously that was a different commission and different jurisdiction too.
Yeah. Yes, Ms. Ryan.
I'm not, I haven't researched this all, that much one way or the other, but I think it would, to make an emergency decision on something like this for what presumably will be a relatively short-term thing, would be the wrong thing to do. If there's enough public interest in it, I can see, looking at it, but for right now, to do something quickly, if it was even possible, would maybe be a little bit too much, I guess.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Walker, yeah.
Yeah, my recollection is that at the zoning board, we discussed this issue a year or two ago. And I think we had sort of talked about it and said the problem with it is that if you do it for one, first of all, you got to do it for everybody. And then the noise of the chickens and stuff to the neighbors would be somewhat disconcerting. And I have great, feelings for the family, and I understand what they're talking about. But I agree with my fellow commissioner that to do it on an emergency basis is not the right idea. If we felt the citizens of the township wanted this, we could certainly start some sort of process to investigate it and look to modify the ordinance. But I think to do it on a quick reaction is not a good idea.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Ryan.
I just say and it's something where, you're talking about living things. So if you do it right, if you do it, then how do you undo it? Do you say you can do it for 2 months, but then you got to kill all the chickens and go back to normal? I mean, it's hard to go backward once you've started it also. So.
Certainly. Mr. Groves.
A lot of considerations on something like this, access and setbacks from residential properties, how many different animals would be allowed, are they being processed on the property? All those considerations, I think, have to be taken into account. Quick knee-jerk reaction, I think, would not be appropriate.
A lot of factors, then, how many chickens, the dwellings, the caring and so forth, certainly. Further comments, feedback from my fellow commissioners? So given the kind of summarize, given the current budget restraints, the lengthy process this takes to actually make an amendment to an ordinance, and the other factors, maybe something we can, put on the list to, look at and consider. It was overall because, maybe there's opportunity for, more chickens than what's currently provided for also, right? You got 2.5 acres, maybe you can, have a couple chickens already, and for the smaller lots too, maybe, and it could be a pathway, but for a quick fix, I don't think it's there, unfortunately, at this time. It's something we can continue to look at. Any other burning desires or thoughts on or feedback on it? Okay, Mr. Reynolds.
I say we keep it on the list and discuss it with potential future text amendments, but nothing at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Steimel.
I think we could advise the person that, believe me, they can still make a request for a text amendment. They could just come in and apply, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's not cheap, and they need to understand it's a timely process.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like I said, we'll probably go back and pull out a lot of our notes from when we discuss this. And I agree with Mr. Walker. It was about a year and a half ago. It was coming up. And I remember, I think a lot of that was about people wanting to have chickens right in a lot of cities, and we were trying to get ahead of it at the time. So I think whatever's there is going to be similar used for this too. So I don't mind looking at it, but I just don't know if it's a high priority for us to do it right now. But if the applicant wants to do it, they can. They just need to understand it's costly, right? I think there was a fee, and it's not fast, and there's no guarantee that they'll get what they want in the long run anyway. But they are capable of putting in an application. So hopefully they're listening to this and see what it's kind of like, and they can make a decision whether they want to or not.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, I think has his hand first, then Mr.
Yeah. No, Lake can be first.
Oh, this may spawn more questions.
I was just gonna say, since this is a discussion, I didn't know if you'd ever get to the point that you'd call public discussion, but I have seen that she sat through the meeting, so I wanted to make sure you do call public comment on that in case she has any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Walker.
And if she is listening and is going to talk to us, that's great, because I was thinking friends of mine have got like rabbits and things at someone else's property, someplace in that's zoned for farming and stuff, that they keep pets or food animals someplace else. So perhaps you could think about doing that.
Any further comments from my commissioners? And then I'll open up for a public discussion. All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and if you could open the lines up, Ms. Gerling, and if anyone like to make a comment, please do so. If you have anything to add or share with us, take any public comments via written in. Don't feel obliged, but by all means, if you'd like to share any comments via video on the phone and or write it in the chat box or email, certainly open. And my others, if they may chime in. So if not, we'll keep on the list of our items that we work on and see what we can work in possibly in the future. But of course, you can again apply for the true text amendment, but it is a process we outlined. So.
I do have a chat bubble.
Okay, wonderful.
903 from Kate. Thank you for taking the time to discuss this and maintain an open mind about potential future changes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for the feedback and thank you for bringing it forward to us. Yeah, you know, hopefully at least got some feedback and got our wheels turning without having to go through the labor and costly process to officially kickstart it. But by all means, if you want to, you can. And we'll continue. And any other information, we'll keep looking at it. Thank you. All right. So with that, we'll continue on with the agenda. And taking us, go back up. We have now, we'll move on to item number 8, unfinished business, which we have no unfinished business on this tonight. Number 9 is our public comment. Any member of the public wish to make a comment? Now is the time, free for all. Raise your hand. I don't see anyone on the video sharing at this time. So any hands? Or via phone, please state your name. And are there comments via chat box or the email by chance, Ms. Gurley?
We have nothing.
Okay, we'll continue on. We have a number of communications before us. Under item 10A, we had communications from our planning and zoning director regarding administrative review of PC 2020-04, Breckenridge flagpole administrative review and site plan. So it looks like we approved a flagpole over there on Brown Road on that one, right?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for always keeping us informed of what's happening there. And Ms. Gerling, by all means, raise your hand and chime in if there's anything particular on any of these items. But we appreciate you as always keep us updated. And item 10B under communications, we have the planning and zoning administrators regarding the review regarding the administrative review of PC 2020-09 Kroger order pickup lanes and administrative site plan review. So they added, I think it was 4 spots. So we appreciate you being timely and administratively doing that as we adapt kind of with the times here. And then lastly, looks like we're upgrading some of our equipment. So item 10 under communication C, we had the communication again from our planning and zoning director regarding the administrative review of PC 2020-10, which is the Orion Township equipment upgrade. And so that was on the Joslin, what do you call it, the tower, if I recall?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful.
Here at Township Hall.
Cool. So keep us latest and greatest update with the 911 and other services and equipment. So thank you. And continue on. We'll keep going with the agenda. Item number 11, we have our planners report and education. So we got some additional information from you today. So please, Rod, if you want to give us an overview of what you have for us.
Yes, thank you. Just 2 items, actually. One, I wanted to start off by saying that yesterday I was a speaker for a Lunch and Learn webinar sponsored by the Michigan Association of Planning, discussing how communities are dealing with master plan and zoning amendments during the pandemic. And I went through what we're doing with our firm and how we're addressing these types of projects. And one of the examples I gave was actually you guys. I said Orion Township is in fact going through the process of actively reviewing zoning text amendments, holding public hearings. And I talked about the process and how your go-to meeting process is working really well, and that I feel like it's hasn't hurt discussions. I feel like in some ways, I think some discussions have improved with this format. So it was an interesting overview, but I just thought I'd let you guys know that you were mentioned as a positive community doing good things and keeping things moving forward during this pandemic time.
And I was out there and I appreciated seeing it. Thank you, Rod.
Oh,
You did a fine job in your presentation.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. I'm glad you were listening. That's awesome. So the next item I want to just briefly cover is our latest newsletter, because it really does hit right on the topic of what's happening right now. And it's called Experience the Future. But as we do think about the pandemic and we think about the fact that we're all getting used to this type of technology that we're on right now. So we have all this virtual meetings, we have distance learning. I don't know if any of you have experienced telemedicine, but we have in our family for some minor doctor visits and online shopping, and there's all kinds of things happening that are changing the way we operate within our world. But also, there's changes being made in terms of how goods and services are being provided and how they're being delivered. And the deliveries are very interesting because we're talking about not only alternative transportation routes, including use of air rights, use of sidewalks, and then use of roads, of course. But we're also looking at how are those going to be regulated, and how is loading and unloading going to be addressed? There's a lot of really interesting topics. So some of the things we point out here are delivery bots are active right now. Several universities, they're delivering food from the food halls to the dorms using delivery bots, and you're going to start seeing more and more of that. It's active in other ways, delivering goods, and it goes down the sidewalk. So the question becomes, how does that impact pedestrians? How does it impact other users of the sidewalk? What about with social distancing, physical distancing? If you've got bots on the sidewalk, does that impact how you make all that happen? There's self-driving delivery vehicles. U.S. Department of Transportation has approved an exemption to allow public road testing of autonomous vehicle home delivery system by Neuro. This was in February 2020, so that's going to be actively on the road. We're starting to see more and more of that. Amazon, UPS have all launched delivery drones. They're being tested. In fact, UPS is the first one to receive the certification, which allows drones to flight out of operator site and also with heavier items as part of the UPS airline division. So, and then finally, just another item worth mentioning is with e-bikes. There are now e-cargo bikes that can make deliveries with electronic bikes, 60 miles per day per charge. And all of it, where are these going to go? Do these go down the roadway? Would it ever be appropriate for them to be on a bike lane? Would it ever be appropriate for them to be on a sidewalk? These are all questions that are going to have to be addressed, and local governments need to be thinking about them. So some of the other things that we talked about are how this really does create an opportunity for rethinking our ordinances. Distribution centers, I think, is one you've already had some exposure to in terms of there are different, some commercial uses are being converted into distribution centers. We've actually seen regional malls that are being converted into Amazon warehouses for distribution. There's going to probably be pressure for other distribution centers. We're seeing former industrial and office areas that are being converted into medical and recreational marijuana. You're generally familiar with that as well. And then there's also delivery of those products that may take place by drone or by delivery bot. And how might that happen? So one of the opportunities we see here is scenario planning, where we can talk about possible positive and negative outcomes associated with the pandemic and some of the things that I just talked about. One of the things that's getting some attention is curb space. So curb space may become flex space. So one part of the day, it could be where you can park a car. Another part of the day, it could be where we have ride sharing, drop off and pickup. And then another part of the day, it could be loading and unloading by some of these types of vehicles that we're talking about. So that might be something worth exploring. Data research and collection. Regarding the shifts in land use, communities can be proactive by researching and collecting data on the land use impacts around the country, monitor what makes sense, and looking how other communities are treating some of these. Some of these communities will be the first to have some of this new technology, and we can learn from some of the things they've done. And then a short-term project, maybe a community may wish to allow a pilot project for short-term trial basis to open the door for these types of technologies. And then you can use the information you learned from that to consider future ordinance amendments. License fees, is there a need to license some of the use of the public realm for some of these activities to occur? And then another opportunity is an emergency declaration. Working with your municipal attorney, you may be able to say, okay, given the situation, I think one of the things that we're starting to see now, and I think you even had one of those on the on your agenda is we're seeing some temporary use of parking lots for things that maybe are not explicitly called out in the ordinance, but during the pandemic, we're trying to provide for the opportunity for people to get goods and services. That might go beyond that into other areas, and maybe it would be worth it to even have a provision in your ordinance that would allow for flexibility when a emergency is called, so that you could have staff approval of certain operations within certain boundaries in order to facilitate a quick response to an emergency situation. So that's a brief overview. We plan to make this into a series and actually address similar topics in coming months with this newsletter. So I'll check back with you and keep you informed as new information becomes available.
Wonderful. Thank you for the continued great work and keeping us apprised and bring timely subject matter. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's see. Committee reports. Not too many site walks going on these days. Not seeing any. Future public hearings. We have anything coming up? No, nothing coming up there. Okay. Chairman's comments. No comments tonight, I guess. I'll keep it short. So with that, I'll turn over to my fellow commissioners. If anyone has anything, we'll start at the screen. On my screen top, I got Mr. Walker. Anything to add?
As well you should. No, I have nothing to add.
All right. Hi, Mr. Gross. Oh, it was muted, so I guess no comments.
Good job tonight. No comments.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Mr. Steimel.
Tammy, I want to commend Tammy. I think the little intro that she does at the beginning, and I'm sure he's got like a little checklist for Justin. At least it seems like it. You're following a very set procedure for getting in comments from people and stuff. I might actually talk about it at the next township board meeting, that maybe Tammy can share that with the township board, because it's a little less smooth at that level, you know. But this process that you've worked out is working quite well. I commend you for it, and thank you. Like I said, everybody gets a chance to speak and stuff like that. So, and hopefully I've worked out the last of my technical issues, so I don't become a problem when you can't see me. You can hear me, I can hear you, I can see the presentations, but for whatever reason, my camera won't share, but seems to be working better now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Ryan.
I second what John said. I think this does move very smoothly, and I know Tammy worked very, very hard getting it all in order and all that. So second that.
You all know how I'm not good at technology, so it was a struggle.
I'm phenomenal. Phenomenal. Mr. Reynolds, any comments?
Just would echo the same comment. Thanks to Tammy and the entire planning staff for the follow through, the follow up, making sure everything's running smooth and making sure we have all the info that we need to still make this happen. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes, first time. And thank you.
Yeah, I forgot. I had one more thing. Like, I knew I had two things. I couldn't remember what they do. I have a request on the planners letters. You know, when we look at them on these board books, you know, it's just a long PDF document that we got to go, you know, you can't jump around that easily. You got to kind of page by page. And possibly if you could have a summation, like at the end of your report, you know, conclusions, similar in format to what the engineers have. I mean, you have great detailed individual items, but when we're trying to get, I'm trying to get to it so I can do my bullet points if I'm going to make a motion, and it's a lot of stuff to try to pound through, that if we just have that quick conclusions at the end, which is just some footnotes about what we should be discussing and potentially in a motion, that would really be helpful. Now, I don't know, maybe the other commissioners are okay with it, but I'm finding it hard on the paperless system to jump around and get all that stuff quickly like I'd like to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually, we're working on trying to streamline the letters a little bit. There's a lot of your ordinances are very thorough. There's a lot of information to cover, and so we are yes. I think you'll see some changes as we continue to try to improve things as we go through the process. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all the hard work, comments, Ms. Gerling and team for keeping us all on point, and everyone for all the work they do. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, moved by Mr. Steimel, support by Mr.
Support.
Reynolds. All in favor, aye, thumbs up. Aye. All in favor, no, thumbs down. All right, I guess we're adjourned. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned, and have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you again
everybody.
next week. Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
Bye. Thank you.